to the living room with Joanna Davis. My name is Jody Jewett, and I'm the co-host today. And we will be interviewing our wonderful host, Joanna Davis, today. We've been talking about this for months. So, the beginning of the year, we were going to go ahead and we've been interviewing a lot of people, telling their stories, sharing testimonies. And today, we just wanted to interview our host and the desire that she's had to start this show to transform and change lives. So, welcome, Joanna. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty good.
Good.
Doing pretty good. I'm pretty excited about just sharing my story. I find it very important to let those that are watching and that have been watching that I'm really truly motivated by doing the living room based on just my own story. I know how important it is to share with others our victories, just our testimonies, that it can change and transform lives. And so, over the months we've had several different interviews and people, and I know that many people have been inspired and they have been transformed, changed, and it's really important to also just tell my own story. I'm always, I share with people that, you know, only the person that has been through something can tell their own story.
Yeah.
So many people try to tell your story, but you're really the one that can tell it the best way. And so I thought it would be important for me to share my story, and to hopefully inspire and transform the lives of people through just all the things that I have been through. Um, I know there's been times where I've went to different settings and conferences, and people were like, "Joanna, tell your story," and I'm like, "How many minutes do I have?" And they're like, "Oh, you got 15 minutes." I'm like, "Oh, well, that ain't gonna work."
Right.
We're talking 49 years of stuff, and I cannot tell that story in 15 minutes. So I knew that one day that I would have to stand in front of the cameras myself and share and let people know where this vision really came from. And it was just knowing that stories, testimonies change lives. And it's been great. It's been great the last few months listening to others. And I had always told you, I was like, one day I'll just tell mine. I don't know when, but I'm going to do it. And so, because I know that my story is a very intense story. And I've had a lot of people, family members, friends that have tried to tell their version of my story. And in that, there has been things that were not true. There were things that were true. There were things that people just assumed or they added on.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to tell it myself. And I wanted to be able to let the truth be told about Joanna Davis.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
that's why I'm here.
Well, I know your story. I've heard it, and it's inspired me. So
Yeah.
whenever you're
Yeah.
ready to get started.
Okay. I would just say that, well, first I was born in April 18th of 1971 to my parents, Violet and Leon. And I can honestly say my childhood is a very blur memory. However, I know that I hungered for my father's love, but I really never understood my mother's. And I grew up with her working a lot, and I remember very faint memories of like I said, of my childhood. I don't remember a lot with my mom being like loving and hugs and kisses and things of that nature. My father, he was in and out of my life. I still have a memory though. I think I must have been about maybe 5. I remember going to King Elementary School, and we lived on, it was either 13th or 14th Street, whatever street that is. And we lived in a little bitty house, and there was like a window in the living room. And I remember looking out the window, waiting on my dad to come get me. And I must have been roughly 4 or 5, because I know that I was in kindergarten or Head Start or whatever at King Elementary. And I would sit in that window for a long, long time, and he would never show up. And I remember my mom looking at me and saying, I knew he was going to do this again. And so those are some of the memories as a small child. I also remember my mother, again, she was single, raising us. I think she had a few boyfriends in and out of our lives, but my grandmother did most of the caregiving for us because my mom worked a lot. And like I said, my father, he was in and out of my life. I didn't really see him much, and when I did, it was never enjoyable.
Right.
But I'll tell that in a little bit. But I remember my grandmother always talking about Jesus all the time. And one of the things that, when I think about being so young, is she was the kind of grandma that she could put any kind of meal together, because we didn't have a lot of money. And one of my favorite meals she used to make was pork and beans and hamburger.
Something so simple.
I remember that, and it was like the best. And she made the best fried chicken. However, my mom, like I said, she worked a lot, and I didn't get to really receive that motherly bonding as a young child. And then I remember always having to walk to the bus because we never really had a car. And when we did, the only car I can remember is like a little I think it was white or blue. I can't quite remember, but it was like one of the little Volkswagen Bugs cars. I remember that, and I'm only sharing like some of these memories because, like I said, I have very faint memories of my childhood. I don't have birthday memories, or I just don't have them. And some of that was due to, I believe, the trauma that I was experiencing as a child. I remember my mom was very, and again, I'm telling this story about my mom, but I love my mother. And so I don't ever want anyone to think that I'm like saying all these things about my mom because I have a problem with my mom, because I don't. I love her very much. But these are my memories, and these are the things that shaped and molded my life. And so she was a very impatient mom. She did a lot of screaming, yelling. Um, I don't know what was going on with her at that time in her life, but I would assume that she had a lot of disappointments herself, and that molded and shaped her way of how she parented. And I know that she um, grew up in Mason City, Iowa, and that's pretty much it. She's a twin, and her father passed away when she was in her early 20s, and so whatever happened to her, I'm sure was what caused her to not be as I don't know, loving and supportive, the way that most parents would be, especially moms. However, she did her best. She worked all the time. She worked. I remember my mom going from one job to the next, one job to the next. She went from Yonkers to Target, Target to Yonkers, and we'd walk down these little paths. And I remember walking with her, getting on the bus, um, always trying to, make sure that we had the necessities. Like when the winter came, we had snow. What do you call those things? Snowsuits. Mm-hmm. And we'd have our winter boots and our hats and stuff. And we we came from a family that did a lot of hand-me-down type of stuff. And I remember one year I was standing in front of King Elementary with a boy snowsuit on and snow boots, and I used to get teased a lot. And I remember I told myself, I'm not going to get teased, not one more day. Not one more day. So I snuck my shoes in my bag, and the next day I was out there in the cold with my shoes on, because I was like, nobody's going to tease me again that I look like a boy. And so I would, those, and believe it or not, I believe that even shaped my life, because those things affect children. Mm-hmm. And so, my mom, like I said, she worked a lot, and my grandmother was more of our caregiver when she was able to. And there was a time, I must have been about, I want to say 6 or 7. And my mom was working, and my grandmother, she worked for a boys' home. So she did, outside of caring for us, she had a house that she worked with troubled boys. Mm-hmm. And so when she wasn't able to care for us, my mom had her favorite nephew care for us.
Okay.
And I believe my brother was not born yet, but my mom was, I think, somewhere in pregnant or something. Anyway, it was me and my little sister, and my cousin would come over and take care of us. And that's where life really kind of spiraled out of control for me as a young person, little kid, because he was molesting me. And
how old were you then?
I think I want to say maybe 6 or 7, something like that. I can't quite remember, but I know that my brother was not born yet.
Okay. That
I remember. And so he would molest me. He would do things to me that little girls shouldn't know. And
how old was he?
He was a lot older than me. Okay. Like, he was a teenager.
Okay.
Like, probably 15, 16, maybe. Okay. 17. I'm not sure. I don't know his age for sure. Okay. However, and it got so bad that I would run and hide in closets. And I would purposely urinate on myself so that he wouldn't touch me. Because he would come in there after I urinate, and he would say, "Oh, you little stinky little thing. You done peed on yourself again." And I would do that when I could. Like, if I was able to get away from him, that's how I would keep him from messing with me. And I didn't know it was bad, but I knew it was bad. Like, I knew it didn't make me, I was almost like kind of petrified, scared. But anyway, but I did love him. Like, he was my cousin, he was my family. And I couldn't quite, like, put it all together. Like, I didn't understand all of that. Right. So anyway, that went on for a couple of years. And by the time I was, in between that time that all that was happening, I became a child that was, as my mother would say, or my grandmother would say, or others would say, she's just a bad kid. She doesn't listen. My mother, like I said, had a lot of whatever she went through in her life, it spilled over on me because I was the oldest child. So I got a lot of the I don't know, whenever she was angry, she or upset, it fell on me. And so in return, I became a child. I became rebellious. I even wasn't very nice to my sister and brother. Not because I didn't love my sister and brother, but whatever was going on inside of me at the time that I could not identify because I was a child.
Right.
Now today I know what it was. It was a lot of rejection, abandonment, hurt. I was abused, molested, all of those things. Anyway, I wasn't very nice to my brother and sister. Matter of fact, many a times I blamed my brother and sister for things that I had done, and because I didn't want to get the spanking, I didn't want to get the whooping, so they would take the whooping for me. Right. And I know that shaped their lives, and God knows that I wish I could take all that back. However, when you're a kid, you don't know those things, and so there was a time that within that time, my dad was in and out of my life. Like I can't even really describe what that looked like, except he might have came like 2 or 3 times a year, and take me back to his house where he was married to another woman and I had another sister.
Now, was it during holidays, birthdays, or just random?
Random
weekends.
Yeah, because holidays, I never saw him. His mother used to pretend that the gifts she was giving me was from him.
Okay.
But they never were.
Right.
They were always from her.
Right.
She was always trying to, and that's another part of the story, but she was always trying to pamper my dad and make excuses for him. Yeah. So anyway, but I would go, and I remember the only memories I have of my dad when I did have time with him was being in a home where he was married to a white woman, and I had a mixed sister, and I remember the favoritism. She really didn't like me because I was the oldest child, and I was kind of like the orphan child. The poor little girl that came from the other woman. Right. And so my sister was treated differently. She'll tell you that she wasn't, but we all have our own experiences. Right. And she was treated differently than me. Her mother was very mean to me. And when I was there, my dad was really never around, and when he did, and the reason he wasn't around because he was an alcoholic. All he did was drink. So when he would come home, it would be late at night, and I would hear the screams and the yells from the other room where he was beating her. Okay. And my sister and I remember there was this cubby like up in the wall, and we would climb up in the cubby and we would hide in the cubby to get away from whatever he was doing to her. And I remember one time I came downstairs, and I'll never forget that these are like so vivid to me. She would be in the kitchen, his wife, and she would wear this white like negligee, like sleeping gown. And she, I can still like visualize her figure and how she would wear this thing, and I believe she was always trying to like be sexy in front of my dad to make him feel important. And she would turn around and she'd have black eyes. And you would see sadness And we were like kids sitting at the kitchen table, speechless, not knowing really what to say. And anyway, those are my memories of my dad when I was younger. I don't remember hugs and kisses and um, daddy love. I didn't have that. Um, I just remember being the problem child, the child that nobody wanted because she's just too much trouble. And so then I got around 11, 10 or 11, somewhere around there. And my mom was in a relationship with my stepdad. And my stepdad, um, at that time, I didn't like him. I thought that he had come in and, he was just another added problem to our family.
Right.
And so he favored my brother because my brother was there when he was there when my brother was born. So he basically took on the father role of my brother. And there was me and my sister, um, my other sister. And because my mother has three children, me, myself, my sister, and brother. And so he raised my brother, but he was in the picture and he didn't like me. He did not like me. Um, I think my mother tried to overlook that because she really loved him. At least I think she thought she did. And she was, I think, in denial about even her own relationship with him at that time. But I think my mother really wanted us to have a good life, and he was a provider.
Right.
He worked hard. I mean, he worked hard. He was a construction worker and all those things. So I think, truthfully, she wanted to give us the best life possible. And so she just dealt with him because
Right.
he was a provider.
Right.
And, but he was also at that time mean. At least he was mean to me. And, my sister and brother have their own story and version of who he was to them. But I'm sharing my version because I think that he was different in all of our lives. Like he played a different person in all of our lives because we even had he had children. So they have their own version of who he was. And in no way am I, saying anything against them or him and their relationship. However, I'm sharing my relationship. And you'll know that through my story as I tell it, I'm going to reference my version because I don't want anyone to think that I'm speaking bad about their father or their mother. But this is my experience with them. And
Right.
so he was mean to me.
And it sounds like, just from hearing your story, you had a lot of relationships from parents and um, father figures that you didn't feel that love.
Yes.
A lot of rejection.
A lot of rejection.
Yes. Yes.
That's been my hardest stronghold in my whole entire life.
It's rejection.
And I'm going to try not to get emotional.
Yes.
But, so, he, I think he loved me, but maybe not in the beginning. When we really started, my mom started building this family. I remember we used to get spankings with my grandfather's old army belt. And I remember him telling her she needs a whooping. And my mom would whoop me. She would whoop me. And I believe that he got tired of me because even though I was abused and neglected and all those things, I was like a little warrior.
Mm-hmm.
I was mouthy,
Mm-hmm.
and I know I was.
Right.
And I would say things.
So going back to that, did you ever tell anyone in your family, your mom, your grandmother, about the abuse, or did no one know?
No one knew.
Okay.
But when it came to my stepdad and us kind of being in that phase of our life, I believe my mom was in denial.
She knew something.
She knew something. She
Yeah.
was just in denial.
Right.
My mom, because I remember as a kid saying, I'll never be like her. Like, I'm never going to be like her. Like, she doesn't stand up. She gets pushed over.
Right.
And I'm never going to be like her. And I think at a very young age, I took on that attitude. Like, I'm not going to let nobody mess with me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that my stepdad at that time couldn't handle my sassiness, I would call it my boldness,
Yeah.
because I was really acting out what was going on the inside of me.
Right.
I was hurt. I was feeling unloved. I was feeling rejected. I was feeling abandoned. I wanted to even kill myself. I remember having thoughts of suicide at 10 years old. Like, if I just die, I wonder if they'll even care that I'm even existing. Like, I thought like that.
Right.
And so I remember one day my mom was like, "You're going to go live with your grandma. You're too much." And so my mom sent me over to my dad's mother. And I just remember memories of old candy and an attic and Pabst beer. And she would drink beer. I think it was Pabst. I'm almost sure it was Pabst.
Pabst Blue Ribbon.
Yeah, I'm almost sure it was that. And she'd go up in the attic and bring down old candy and just all that stuff. And so I had to go live with her. And she wasn't very nice to me. You know, like I said, this is my version of what I experienced as a young girl. Because I'm sure everybody has their own version of how they see every person that I'm about to share in my story.
It's perception.
But this is my story, and only I can tell it. And so I remember being there in her house, and it was cold, just cold. And I want to say I was probably 9 or 10. I may get the ages a little wrong in this because I went through so much as a kid. And I remember she would purposely like pull my hair every morning to do my hair to go to school. And during that time that I was there with her, I was being touched by my other cousin. And I'm sure that cousin's probably not going to agree with it. And but this is my story. And he would touch me. And it was very inappropriate. And he was probably maybe, I don't know. I don't know how old he was. I just know he's older than me. And anyway, I lived with my grandma for a while. Like I said, it was really cold. I felt very different than everybody else. I could never understand why I had to live with my grandma and not my dad.
Right.
But I think at that time my dad had, either he was living out on the south side or he was on his way to move to California. I don't remember. But anyway, I had to be stuck with my grandma. And she wasn't loving. She didn't hug me. She didn't read me stories. I was more of a burden. And that was just a place to drop me off at. And I remember I had an aunt, and they wanted to put me through therapy. And so I ended up going to a therapist, and I'll never forget the therapist's name. Her name was Pedagraphy. And she was a nice lady. But I just remember being in there like, why am I in this room? Why am I talking? Like, I used to start thinking like, I'm just a child that nobody wants. I'm just a burden. And I felt that way. Um, and I really was confused, like, just confused on just, I felt like I was just being, like, tossed from one person to the next person. And I had this aunt, and at one point I went over and stayed with my other aunt. And bless her heart, she tried. I think she was the aunt that I felt a little bit of love.
Right.
I felt a little bit, not a whole lot, but I felt a little bit. Like she was probably more active in my life than all the other people.
Did
And
she have kids?
she had children.
Okay.
But unfortunately, in that house, I was molested.
Oh, wow.
By my cousin. And again, this is my story. And so that happened. And eventually I ended up going like back to my mom somehow. And then they decided to move way out east. And it was all away from everything that I knew. Like whatever little friends I had on the block. Because I lived on Jefferson. And I had a friend around the corner, Ray. And I had another friend up the street, Becky. Mm-hmm. And anyway, and there was another boy up the street. He ended up being my little playboy friend. And Marlon, that was his name, Marlon. I bless his heart. I know that he had some struggles in his life too. I remember seeing him not too long ago. But anyway, I was taken from that, and I was taken out east, and my mom and my stepdad moved out there, and I went through going to a different school, different friends. I had desires that I think were very inappropriate at my age. Because I remember going to school in middle school. I went to Goodrill. And I think I was like wanting a boyfriend. I just was going through a lot of different emotions. And
love, sounds like.
Yeah, and I just, life for me was different and hard as a young person. And so I got to a point where I wanted my friends. So I would run away from home. And I'd show up back on the west side, and I'd be sleeping in my friend's house, Becky, in her garage in an abandoned car. Or she would sneak me in her house, and I'd go in her house, and I'd tell her I wanted her mom to adopt me. Things like that. Right. I ended up going back out to my mom's, and my virginity was, let me just say it like this, my first decision to have sex on my accord, right, on me making that decision, was with this white boy. Okay. I'll never forget it. And it was the worst thing in the world. And I remember leaving there and going back to my house, and I just kind of spiraled out of control after that. My mom sent me to California to finally be with my dad.
Okay.
And I went with my dad, thinking things would be different for me. Like, woo, I can go be with my dad now. And I went with my dad. And there I had to meet that same old lady again, his wife. And she was mean to me. She did not like me. And my sister at that time was very spoiled. And so all the attention was always on her. And the only memory I have with my dad was we would drive to Castro Valley. I think it was Castro Valley. And we would get round table pizza. I remember that. And he would put anchovies on the pizza.
Okay.
So those were my memories in California with my dad. I remember that. I remember going there, and I remember being so happy about round table pizza with anchovies. Anyway, my dad worked. So during the day, my stepbrother, which was my stepmother's son, he was gay.
Okay.
And nobody wanted to admit it, but he was gay.
Okay.
And he was mean to me. Very, very mean to me. I remember him putting his hands on me, and I would tell my dad, and my dad wouldn't believe me, and his wife would call me a liar. Mm. So by that time, I was still in middle school, and I went to a school up in the valley, and I met a boy. His name was Michael Shepard. Michael Shepard, I'll never forget. He was the hot thing of the middle school, and I got him. And wow. We would catch the bus, and I would hold his hand the whole time. And I think we even kissed. Anyway, I ended up, my dad got tired of me. He did. He got tired of me. He didn't want to deal with me no more. And he sent me back to Des Moines. And I went back home to my mom. And then I started running away from home. And I became very rebellious. And when I would run away from home, I would have to find, places to sleep. Right. And so I ended up sleeping with guys just to have a place to lay my head at night. Right. Again, I was still considered rebellious, hard-headed. She's this, she's that. She don't want to listen. And for the most part, I was rebellious and hard-headed, and I didn't want to listen because I was broken. Mm-hmm. I was completely broken. So by the time I was 13, I was still in my dad's car from the east side to the west side. And they got tired of that.
Now your stepdad.
My stepdad.
Okay.
They got tired of that. And so eventually I was back out on the streets. And I was 13 by that time. And my mom will tell you she would not let me back home. Because she wouldn't. And I met a guy. And I got pregnant. With my first son at 14. And he beat me. He beat me and left me in the Southside dumps. Wow. And so I went back to an old boyfriend, pregnant. And that gentleman took me into his mom's house. We stayed in the basement. I told him that the baby I was carrying was his. He was... Let's see. He's 8 years older than me. Okay. But he was an abuser. And he would beat me. He would beat me all the time. I was 14 years old with black eyes. Busted lips. And I remember one time I was 8 months pregnant with the baby. And I came home and he was downstairs having sex with another girl. And I caught him, and he came up the stairs, and he beat me in front of that girl. And anyway, I end up having, and I skipped some parts because there was a time that I was just on the streets. Right. But anyway, I was pregnant, and I gave birth to my son. I was 15. I looked at that baby and I was like, what am I going to do with this baby? But I loved him. I loved him a whole lot. I remember singing Anita Baker to him. All the time. And for some reason, the song went out of my head. But it was a song, and I used to sing it to him. Anita Baker was my favorite at that time. But the guy that I said was the father of him, he was mean to me. He was so horribly mean to me. And his mom too. She's evil. And yes, I said it. She's still evil to this day. She's evil. And I remember she used to tell me that I deserved what he did to me if I would just shut my mouth. And so we moved out of his mom's house. Now, mind you, I had no idea that they were all on drugs. He was on drugs, she was on drugs, and his daddy was on drugs. I didn't know. I was only 15. I wasn't into drugs.
Right.
You know.
Never smoked marijuana.
If I did, I don't remember.
Right.
Like, I was not an active person into drugs. I was just broken. Trying to look for love in all the wrong places.
Yeah.
And mind you, my son, is not his. But he's put his name on the birth certificate. He's claiming this child. But this child still has a real dad.
Right.
Okay? So anyway, we move out. And I get pregnant again. So now I'm pregnant at 16. With a baby and a belly. And we moved to this apartment on Woodland. I'll never forget this apartment on Woodland because it was the worst ever. I remember giving birth to I gave birth to my first son, and we moved into this apartment. I was pregnant with my other son. And again, I didn't know that they were on drugs. And he was on drugs, and he came home one night because we lived in this real little bitty 1-bedroom apartment, and he grabbed me by the neck and he lifted me up and he choked me and he threw me he opened the door like somehow and threw me out the door and started kicking me and kicking me and kicking me and kicking me until I literally felt my body unconscious. I could hear, but I couldn't move. The next day, I remember waking up and him there saying, "You know I love you. You know I love you. But you need to shut your mouth when I tell you to shut your mouth." So anyway, the beatings continued from black eyes, busted lips, every name you can think of to degrade me. And we end up moving, and we end up moving back with his parents into another house. And I was pregnant with my second son. And I remember the day that I gave birth to my son, he raped me. He forced me to have sex with him. And I was saying to him, but I can't. I'm going to deliver a baby soon. Whatever was going on with my body and stuff, and he raped me. And not even, I would say, a matter of hours, I went into labor. And he put me in the car, and he took me to the hospital. And I went into an emergency room to deliver Aaron because he was early. He wasn't even supposed to have been born yet. But he came I want to say 4 weeks early. And I gave birth to him. And from there, he promised me he would never hit me again. I love you. Come on, Joanna. Da 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 da. And so we moved into our own apartment. And mind you, he was always gone. He would go to work. He'd get his paycheck on Friday. And I wouldn't see him till Sunday.
Oh, wow.
Because he'd be out smoking dope.
Okay.
I didn't know. I wasn't a drug addict.
Right.
I just know that he was abusive. All of that.
Right.
And so here I am at home with these two little bitty babies.
So back that up a little bit. Did you think he was cheating at the time he didn't come home all weekend, or what was your thoughts on that? Were you just kind of naive?
Honestly, I think I was naive and numb at the same time.
Right.
Like, I didn't understand life.
Right.
I was really just, and I was really depressed.
Yeah.
Like, I was depressed. I was depressed at 16.
I don't think you've been in a healthy household in a.
I was so depressed.
Yeah.
And so anyway, and there's a lot more. I'm telling my story as I can remember it. I'm sure I've left out some things. However, I was depressed, and I remember one morning. So he called himself being gone over the weekend, and there was a time I came home, and the door was kicked in, and the microwave was gone, the TVs were gone, and come to find out he did a little act like somebody broke in the house, and he stole all the stuff, and he took and did whatever he did with it, right?
Right.
And of course,
So he faked a burglary.
He faked
like
a burglary.
Somebody broke in the house.
Yeah.
And he actually went out and sold the stuff.
Absolutely.
Like, for
that's exactly what he did.
Okay.
And here I am with these two little kids. Both of them in diapers and bottles. Both of them.
Hmm.
And his mom, she just was so horrible. I'm going to try not to say as much as I would like to say about her, because she was a wicked woman. She was just terribly wicked. Anyway, and I could see now why my kids' dad became who he became.
Right.
Because she was so wicked.
Hmm.
She raised him to be an abuser.
Hmm.
She raised him to be an addict.
Yeah.
She raised him that way.
Hmm.
And so, anyway, we moved into another place, but during this transition, he was trying to get clean. So he went and filled out an application. He did something. He went into the military. He was already like a National Guard, mm-hmm. but he wanted to go in full time or something.
Right.
And so he ended up leaving and going to Denver.
Yes. Okay.
And got back into the military or whatever. And I remember being in this house and hearing babies just cry. And I'm like, God, how am I going to raise these kids by myself? I was so used to being abused and him being around. And even if it was hours on days, right. I had gotten used to the abuse. I had gotten used to him going and being gone for days. And to actually know he was gone,
right.
I was lost.
Hmm.
And I remember waking up one morning and I was like, I got to get out of here. So I took a knife and I went to my kids' bedroom and I shut the door and I put a knife in it so they couldn't get out. And I left. Okay. And I can't tell you what I was thinking because I don't remember. But when I returned, my kids weren't there. And I panicked. Where's my babies? Where are my babies? Come to find out, my neighbors must have... No, not my neighbors. A friend of mine had come over. She heard babies crying. They called the police. Mm-hmm. They took my babies to my mom's house. And my stepdad would not let her take them. At that time. At that moment. And I'm not really sure if it was all him and maybe some of my mom or even the Department of Human Services at that matter. So I'm not going to blame that all on him. However, I will say that my babies never got to go with my mom. They went straight into foster care. Then Gary, and this is my kids' dad, I'm going to say his name, and his mother um, basically came up against me and basically told them that I was an unfit mother. Didn't want to tell none of their mess.
Right.
Just that I was unfit, young, didn't have any education. Because I forgot to tell the part that when I got pregnant, I dropped out of school.
So you never went back.
So I never went back to school. My last year was my 9th grade year. Okay. And I only did like the first couple of months of school. And I dropped out. Right. So they basically told them that I was uneducated, da-da-da-da-da-da, all that stuff. And so I found myself being a part of the Department of Human Services. And Gary, at the time, came back from the military to fight for getting the kids. Of course, she made me look like I was the worst thing in the world. And left out all the parts of the abuse and even her being abusive. Because she was she was nasty. Just nasty, nasty.
And on drugs.
On drugs.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Let's not forget that.
Yeah.
And so... at the time DHS was like, Joanna, you got to do this, this, and this. Okay. I think at that time of my life, I was so mentally messed up that I couldn't even figure out how to like make sense of being a mom, make sense of like doing what they were telling me to do. I struggled in that area. I struggled to know that I had to do all this stuff for the department. And at the same time, they were fighting to take my kids from me. So I remember telling them I don't want my kids to go with their dad or their grandma because I don't want them to do to my kids what they did to me. So I asked the department to put my kids in foster care. Just put them in foster care. And they did. But in the meantime, they hired an attorney and ended up getting my kids. And so they got my kids. And I really love my babies.
Well, let's back up, too. You were very young.
Yeah.
And you hadn't had any sense of love, what love, true love felt like.
No.
Unconditional love. So I think that plays a lot of the decisions you were making at that time. Yeah.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I can honestly say that.
You were used to being rejected, unloved.
Yeah.
Every house you went to, there was trauma. Every place, it sounds like from your story, that you went and you stayed and you looked for love or somebody to take care of you, you endured trauma.
All the time.
Yeah.
And I remember my kids went to this really cool foster home. I remember the lady being really, really nice to me. And I would be able to go over there and see them. I can even visualize the house today.
Wow.
Right on the east side of town. And anyway, my kids went through a lot as babies. I tried to keep it together, but it just didn't work. Because I had thoughts of being depressed, but also, like, I even went through a phase of being young and wanting to be wild. Like, I wanted to, like, be a kid. And so I couldn't put the two together. I couldn't figure it out.
Right.
Anyway, they got my kids, and their dad used to use my kids as a leverage to get me to come over and have sex with him. And so I found myself going to his house, having sex with him, to be able to see my kids, have to listen to her badmouth me the whole time. And then, but then the beatings were always there. Then I want to say I must have been about 17, and 18, and he asked me to marry him. And I really wanted to be with my kids, not realizing I still had a part of me that was still young and I wanted to, like, live, I guess. And so I got married. But the day I got married, he beat me in the bathroom. And when I say he beat me, he slapped me across my face, pulled my hair, told me to shut the F up and get downstairs because we got married in the basement of his mom's house. And my mom was there, my stepdad was there, and it was almost like, this is the crazy part that always blows my mind. Nobody said to me, "What are you doing, Joanna?" Like, and what I mean by that is, like, I think they tried in different ways, but, like, I was getting married to a man everybody knew beat me.
Right.
I was getting married to a man that had my kids. Everybody knew his mom was not right, his dad wasn't right. But anyway, I guess nobody could really stop me, but I really never, you know how people say, you know, if you get married,
sure.
like they say something like, does anybody disagree?
Disagree, yeah.
Nobody said no.
Yes, yes.
And I got married.
Right.
And the night of our honeymoon, or whatever you want to call it, I was 18 and he beat me again. And I probably stuck around not even 30 days. I don't really know. I don't remember. But I left. And somewhere around there, I was back on the streets, running the streets or whatever. I met a friend. I got my own place. I did everything to, like, stay away from Gary because all it was beatings. I missed my kids, though.
Right.
And I remember all they used to tell my children was, your mama don't love you. Your mom doesn't love you. Your mom did this. Your mom did that. But nobody ever told my kids
what you experienced.
What I experienced. I remember...
Or why you weren't there.
Right. Like, it was always that way. Always that way.
Mm.
And it's still like that today.
Right.
But anyway, if I remember correctly, I met this friend of mine, and I was 19, and they were like, oh, well, before that, I got in trouble with the law. I tried to sign some checks and ended up going to Polk County Jail. I was like 18.
Mm.
And somehow they even went back in records. I don't really know all of that, but anyway, I got in trouble.
First time in trouble?
First time in trouble.
Okay.
Went to jail. I think I spent 9 months in Polk County Jail.
Mm.
I went in the wintertime. I came out in the summer looking crazy on Mulberry Street with a winter coat.
Mm-hmm.
Went back to Gary. That's how I ended up going back to him again. That was how I was able to see my kids. It was all about sex. Well, and him being on drugs and his mama on drugs, and they was crack smokers. And yes, I said it. They were crack smokers. And anyway, I met this friend, and I needed to get away from Gary. Like, he was terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even want to get into details, but he would do some really sick stuff to me.
Mm-hmm.
Sick. And she's like, you want to make some money? I was like, yeah, I need to get out of here. And she took me we went all the way to Minnesota.
Okay.
Anchorage, Minnesota, or something like that. I think it's called Anchorage. And she's like, all you got to do is dance.
Okay.
That's all you got to do. Make some money. So I went to Anchorage, Alaska. Or not Alaska. Anchorage, Minnesota. Is it Anchorage? Or something like that. I can't remember. Anchorage, Arthur, something Minnesota. And that's crazy. I can't remember the name of that. Starts with an A. Anyway, I ended up there, and we ended up in this bar. And there you had to dance on the bar.
Oh, okay.
And I remember
Not a stage.
No, it was on top of a bar.
Okay.
And I'll never forget, I had on like some Hawaiian looking stuff. Little top bottoms, my little heels, and my red lipstick. And I'm on the stage. I don't know nothing about nothing. And I'm standing there dancing or whatever. And this guy comes up and he's like, honey, he's like, I'll give you some money if you take this. And he handed me a napkin. And he said, wipe that red lipstick off. You're too pretty to wear that. And I wiped it off and he gave me $100. And he did not want me to take my clothes off. He just started laying $100 bills on the stage, on the bar. By the time I was done, like on the bar, sitting down talking with him, I walked away with $5,000.
Oh, wow.
And in my mind, I'm like, shoot, if this is all I got to do, I'm in.
Right.
And I started dancing as a stripper. And it got to a point where I would make money, and Gary knew that I was a stripper. So now, here I am, stripping. I love my kids. I want to see my kids. So I would have to pay him to see him now. And I would pay him so I could see my kids. And even have to give sex. And I would buy my kids stuff, take it to him, and he'd go and sell it for dope. So my kids never got all the stuff that I used to do for them. But again, they would tell my kids I didn't love them and I didn't care for them and I just left them. Like my kids today still believe I abandoned them. And I know that, anyway.
Say it. Say it. God's going to restore everything.
But God told me he would, this years later, he would restore my life.
Thank you, Jesus.
Anyway, I went back out on the road dancing from Anchorage, Alaska to Minot, North Dakota, South Dakota. I went from there to Minnesota, Chicago. I just went everywhere. And then I ended up back down in Des Moines dancing at Big Earl's Gold Mine. And I spent the next 17 years of my life as a stripper. We're done.